Buckle up, because we're merging back into traffic on Radio Nemo's Nemo Nation.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's Monday, so don't adjust your watches. It is Monday, and it's a special day for Tech Talk with TMC, which is, as you know, normally heard on Tuesdays. Well, this morning we're doing something a little bit different. Al Anderson is going to be joining Robert Braswell for a discussion on lighting on this edition of Tech Talk with TMC. Tech Talk with TMC. We always remind you that any TMC recommended practices reflect the consensus of TMC members, and they're offered as recommendations only, and everyone must first determine for themselves if they're safe and appropriate for their operation. And remember, too, that TMC doesn't endorse any product, person, or service, and the opinions expressed on the show today are those of the individual, not necessarily the opinion of his or her company, nor of TMC unless otherwise stated. And having stated all of that, good morning, Robert Braswell.
Well, good morning, Dave Nemo. And to put a finer point on it, we're actually heard ordinarily on Wednesdays now over there on Radio Nemo.
Geez, old habits die hard, huh?
It is. Well, we only did Tuesdays for 17, 18 years, so no problem there. But very great pleasure to be with you here once again. This time on Nemo Nation on Mondays. It's a nice change of pace. We're very pleased to welcome back to the program, as you say, Al Anderson, who is Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Peterson Manufacturing. Al is a longtime TMC member. As you know, he's been very active in several of our TMC study groups, most recently our Corrosion and Collision Control Study Group. He is one of our Silver Spark Plug recipients. That's the Council's highest honor, and we're very pleased he can join us today to talk about important tips on lighting system maintenance and specification that we think our listeners should know. But before we get started, I'd like to mention the special offer this week. It's our PMI manual for technicians. We're offering it for the special price of just $25 plus shipping and handling. To order, you can call our customer service line toll free at 1-866-821-3468. Just mention the Radio Nemo, and you'll get it for that special price. Also, if you're that owner-operator or you're a small fleet, you have 100 or fewer power units, you can join the Technology and Maintenance Council for the discounted annual dues of just $150. Do that today. You'll get our 2-volume recommended practice manual and many other good benefits too. So just call our same toll-free number if you're interested in signing up, or get a hold of us on the web at tmc.trucking.org. And with that out of the way, please welcome to the program Al Anderson. Good morning, Al.
Hey, good morning, Robert. Excuse me. Good morning, Dave. Great to be here. Great to talk with you. It had been a long time, Dave, since we've chatted. So it's a great honor to be on here with you guys.
So, Al, you know, the trifecta of out-of-service issues: tires, brakes, and lighting. And we're going to be talking about lighting today, but let's to start things off. Why do you think lighting tends to be as part of that trifecta? Why do you think it's such a prevalent out-of-service issue for commercial vehicles?
Well, you know, Robert, we always talk about, you know, you mentioned them in different orders, but we talk about BLT around here: brakes, lights, and tires. And lights, it's the most visible thing that an inspector or somebody can see. It's very ubiquitous. If you have a light out, they may not be able to see a brake out of adjustment. They may not be able to see without closer inspection a tire that's a little bit low on inflation, but a light is something that an inspector, and also it's a safety thing. You know, I mean, if the vehicle can't be seen, if the tractor trailer can't be seen, it presents a safety hazard on the road for the motoring public around them. So that's I guess why it gets raised to such a high level. And you know, really out of service is something that happens very rarely. You pretty much have to have all the lights out on one side or the other, or the entire rear of a vehicle before they're going to put you out of service. Most often it's basically just a ticket, a defective equipment ticket.
But if you have the light on the vehicle and it's not illuminating, they can cite you for it, right? So you think about some folks put more lights than they need to put on their trailers or tractors, right? For example, so if you're doing that, be aware those extra lights can cost you if you're not keeping up with them.
Again, it's up to the individual inspector, and this is one of some of the things that we struggle with. At TMC when we talk about best practices, recommended practices, and also in the industry at large. Some inspectors will say if the light's on there, it's got to be illuminated, it's got to work. Others say, look, it's auxiliary. It's not part of the FMVSS 108 mandated lighting, so it's okay if it's not working. As many different inspectors as there are on the road, there's that many different approaches to what's legal and what causes a citation.
Well, it certainly seems that lights are lasting longer than they used to when incandescents ruled the highways, right? With LEDs, light emitting diodes, the lights themselves seem to be pretty robust, but lights still fail. You're supposed to go 100,000 hours or whatever it is with an LED, but it seems like they don't quite go that long. Is that true?
In some cases, that's true. Rarely is it the light itself that fails. Most often, that's the effect as opposed to the cause. Granted, you can always have some sort of failure, could be damaged, whatever. I mean, that's not actually a failure of the lamp.
No.
But it's true that LEDs do last much longer than an incandescent bulb. I mean, when you get a filament in a bulb that heats and cools, that filament gets more brittle every time that happens. LEDs, while they do generate some heat, they're more impervious to the differences in temperature as they illuminate, go dark, light up, go dark. The components on the printed circuit boards inside those LEDs are very, very reliable in everybody's lights today. So rarely is it the light itself. Occasionally, as you say, more often it's the wiring that's sending electricity, sending power to the lamp.
So when we talk about wiring, we usually talk about corrosion when it comes to failures. And the de-icing chemicals that are out there, well, it's that time of the year again. We should be seeing a lot of those mag chloride, calcium chloride problems, shouldn't we?
Absolutely. There's been some pretty rough weather around the country the last couple of weeks since right before Thanksgiving. And so that brings to the front the discussion about the de-icing and anti-icing chemicals that are on the roadways today. It's a variety of different chemicals in a variety of different municipalities, state by state, sometimes even county by county. So you really have to defend your vehicle from all of those different types of anti-icing and de-icing chemicals that everybody wants to put down on the roadways today. And again, any little imperfection or pinhole or anything in a wiring harness that penetrates the outer jacketing and gets into the conductor itself will cause that corrosion, as you mentioned, and eventually, yes, you're going to have one or more lights out on a vehicle, whether it be a tractor or a trailer.
And if you've got to make a roadside repair with a pocket knife and a roll of tape, it's probably not going to be a good idea, right? Because you're going to get that corrosion starting to wick up from where that substandard repair is all the way through that very, very expensive and hard to replace electrical system, particularly on a tractor.
And that couldn't be more accurate. In a powered system, in a powered wiring harness system, if you have corrosion that enters to any degree, pretty much at all, in a matter of hours, it can penetrate the entire system front to back. And like you say, especially in a tractor where these things are wound around through all sorts of different components on the vehicle, very, very complex wiring harness systems on today's vehicles that go up to ECMs and all sorts of things. Boy, you just have to be very, very careful about the integrity of the entire system.
And the problem here is it's high resistance in the wire as it corrodes, and you're basically getting a voltage drop. So you're not getting the current nor the voltage that you need to operate these different systems. As you say, with smart trailers nowadays, you've got little computers here and there using 5 volts here, 5 volts there. Any sort of a compromise in the delivery of that electrical pulse is going to cause performance issues, right?
Absolutely. Today, a lot of the tractors themselves particularly use multiplexing to send a lot of different signals over the same set of wires. And in smart trailers, as you mentioned, pretty much everybody uses a CAN bus system. to go front to back, you get a little bit of corrosion. I mean, those wires are, think of a twisted pair back in the old days of telephone lines, when telephone lines were wired as opposed to wireless. Think of that twisted pair and that telephone wire. That's most often what goes front to back in these smart trailers to carry where it is wired, to carry the information on the information highway through the whole length of the trailer. You get a little bit of corrosion in there, and boy, have you got yourself a bunch of trouble. Because as you say, the signals to sensors, the signals from sensors can get jumbled or become non-existent. Those wires are very, very small gauge. It doesn't take a lot of corrosion to corrode through them. So all of a sudden, you can end up with a very difficult problem to troubleshoot, to track down, and also very expensive to replace. It becomes very problematic, this corrosion thing.
So a couple of other issues that'll come up that aren't necessarily related to the light, but will cause a light out condition is grounds. So, you can do everything right on maintenance, for example, and you don't, compromise the wiring harness, but a ground can go bad. Sometimes the grounds are exposed to the environment and they will corrode, they'll turn green. So you really got to be mindful of the condition of those grounds, particularly since they should be fairly easy to spot as long as you know where the grounds are.
Yeah, absolutely. Grounding issues are probably the second most common cause of electrical system issues. Because as you say, if you don't have a complete circuit, if you don't have a good ground carrying your electricity back to the source, you're going to have, or intermittent ground, you're going to have a real problem. So, we like closed loop systems where there are no grounds, where the ground wire goes all the way back up to the front, where the nose box, where it connects the 7-way cord to the tractor, from the tractor to the trailer, or even in a tractor, if you can manage to do a closed loop system, that's great. And what that means is the ground wire isn't bolted, screwed, hooked in some way to the metal frame or chassis of the vehicle, and allowing that metal frame to carry the ground back up to the source. So it can even be as bad as a fifth wheel that's got grease, that's got a lot of grease on it. That can cause a problem of a ground between a tractor and a trailer. So grounds are probably the second most common thing, next to corrosion that we talked about, of having electrical issues. And as you say, if you don't know where something is grounded at, it becomes really difficult to track the problem down. So closed loop system, always the most reliable.
You're listening to Tech Talk with TMC. We have Al Anderson, Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Peterson Manufacturing. Al, you mentioned in your last response the 7-pin connector, J560. Boy, that's something. We say in the maintenance business, the best connector is no connector. But sometimes you have to have one, and in this case, it's a really, really important one. It's the electrical bridge between the tractor and the trailer. Boy, so much maintenance goes to repairing and maintaining these, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, when you think about, a tractor and trailer can, in some cases, if you're in a drop and hook application, can be hooked and unhooked multiple times each day. That causes wear. I mean, when you put that 7-pin connector into the front of the trailer or into the front of the tractor, in and out many times a day, I mean, it's just natural. It's just the natural course of things. They get worn. Sometimes they get damaged. They fall out of their carrier and they get bounced across the ground, dragged across the ground. There's a number of things that can happen to those connectors that cause a lot of maintenance. So if you see a trailer going down the road and the lights are flickering, most likely you've got a problem in that trailer to tractor to trailer 7-way cord that's carrying all the electricity back to the lights on the trailer. Really high maintenance thing. That's one of the weakest points. My opinion, that's one of the weakest points that we still haven't really figured out a good solution for in all the technology that we've got in today's commercial vehicles. That's, as you say, it's a really high maintenance point.
Even with all the talk of a next generation tractor trailer electrical interface to replace the J560, because I think there's wide recognition that needs to be updated just to take advantage of all the smart trailer technology that's out there and smart tractor technology too. to have faster speeds and so forth, going back and forth between the different parts of the combination vehicle. There is question that all the solutions are basically wired solutions. They have a connector. They'll either have some sort of a side by side or a all-in-one, but bottom line is there's still physical connectors. One day maybe we'll go to wireless and we'll be able to avoid all that problem.
Yeah, what I worry about looking at the solutions, there's some really smart people at TMC and within the industry that are working on some of these connections, the new type of connection to go from a truck back to a trailer. What I worry about is how, we have some backward compatibility questions as well. If you've got a really smart tractor that has the ability to carry all these things up from the trailer, but then you hook onto an older trailer that's not a smart trailer, has just a 7-way connector, now you have some basically potentially open ports in the back of the tractor. What do we do about corrosion there? The area between the tractor and the trailer, if you've ever noticed the front of a trailer, it's a low pressure area. Therefore, it gets all that stuff, the cloud up off the road, comes up between the tractor and trailer. You have really an opportunity for there to get corrosion, some of that magnesium chloride, calcium chloride that we talked about earlier, to get into some of those potentially open connections. I just worry how we're going to seal these things up once we get to that point of needing to carry a CAN connection, potentially maybe a Wi-Fi connection, whatever the extra connectors might be that are going to need to be in that new connector, that new cord. I wonder about what's going to happen with corrosion there. It's a concern.
Well, getting back to the here and now, what are some tips you might give to technicians or maybe just, owner-operators that take care of their own rig when it comes to approaching lighting issues? What should they do to prevent some of these things? What should they do to diagnose them properly so you're not just throwing money at the issue?
Yeah, so diagnostics they've always been an issue, way in the Wayback Machine. I mean, I've been around the industry longer than I care to think about. The common thing was to stick the wiring harness with your test light and see if you had juice at this connector or that connector. Today, boy, oh boy, you just don't want to even come anywhere near a wiring harness and start poking it with a test light. If you have a light that's not working, the best thing you can do, unplug the light, check for power at the terminals that plug into the lamp. If you have power there, then you probably got a bad lamp. But and when it comes to specs, the old PL connections, we call them legacy connections, probably aren't the best thing. You should be specing an amp connector if at all possible. And when you do have to make repairs, try to use heat-sealed butt connectors and some the stuff that goes over that the heat shrink where you heat it with the heat gun. Seal it up as much as possible so that corrosion can't get into the wiring harness.
If you have a LED bulb that goes into a socket, is it a good idea to put dielectric grease underneath that lamp's terminals when you insert it, or leave it dry?
Boy, another great question, Robert. So if you have the older, like I say, that what we talked about a minute ago, the old PL connection, you absolutely have to put dielectric grease in there. Those connectors came out, way back in the incandescent days where the connector probably lasted longer than the bulb did. So you were plugging and unplugging them more often, and you had the opportunity to clean them. Today with LED lights, we still use some of the old PL connectors, and if you have that, then yes, you should be putting dielectric grease in them periodically during some sort of PM cycle or when you have the opportunity to have them unplugged, because corrosion will get in there. Moisture will get in there. They're not a sealed connector. With today's amp connectors...
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, with today's amp connectors and some of the Deutsch connectors and some of those other more sealed up connectors, jury's still out. Some people say put dielectric grease in them. Some people say don't, because they're sealed up enough that if you put dielectric grease in them, it could blow the seal out of the back of them. So follow your manufacturer's recommendations in all cases to make sure you keep the connection as with the highest integrity.
So let's look down the road a little bit. What do you see that's coming down the pike when it comes to new lighting technology or new strategies for lighting technology?
Well, that's a great question. We get a lot of our customers are constantly asking for lower amperage draw, even on LED lights that draw literally, depending on how many LEDs you have in a light, anywhere from 6 to 36. You still have a fractional amperage draw. A lot of our customers are asking us, how low can you get that amperage draw? Because there are so many things asking for electricity on today's vehicles. So that's one thing, keeping the amperage draw as absolutely low as possible. And then also there is some blossoming technology coming along in the industry that hopefully will prevent a light from ever going out. So,
Really?
yeah, without talking too much about it, there is some technology out there where you can do some things with it so that the light just plain never goes out as the fault of the light itself. Now, if you don't have electricity, obviously the light's not going to light up. So you still have a wiring harness integrity piece that you have to be careful of. But yeah, there's some technology out there where we can do some things, and that's as a result of actually TMC task force that's active right now and blossoming recommended practice of what's the best practice and how to address an LED lamp that has multiple LEDs but only has a few of them out, when to replace, when not to replace. So this technology is out there that hopefully we're still going to have that recommended practice, but hopefully will make the days of a light having any LEDs out a thing of the past. Just like just like when we went from incandescent to LED, it was an order of magnitude better. Hopefully this will make it an order of magnitude better yet.
So it sounds like, circling back to our earlier conversation, if it's not the LEDs that are the problem necessarily, it must be the components around the LED. So it sounds like that's where the improvements are happening. Is that right? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. I mean, again, I keep going back to the wiring harness. That's the thing that we just have to make sure we can get electricity to the light. And then, there are other components inside an LED lamp, resistors, diodes, all sorts of things that make the LED light work. You can't just stick electricity in there and expect the thing to light up. You have to have circuits and all sorts of things on a printed circuit board. So, yeah, there's other technology coming in the marketplace that will help this tremendously.
One of the things that has been happening with lighting is these exemptions for rear-facing brake lights. That's been, I guess we've gone through our first exemption already, right? First 5 years, maybe heading for the second. Where do you see the industry consolidating around that?
So that's correct. The one carrier, Grondike, I believe it was, their exemption has been renewed, and I believe some of the other, the NTTC thing, I think, got renewed. There's so many of these exemptions out there; it's kind of hard to keep up with those. But yeah, that talks about the brake activated pulsating light, or whatever it's called. Again, an active RP at TMC. It started out with just the very, very first ones were just an amber light that was pulsating anytime the brake pedal was pushed, anytime the brake lights were to be on. Then it sort of morphed over to a red pulsating light that activated anytime the brakes were pushed. And today, I think where things are going, what seems to be going to become the industry best practice is amber light flashing so many times in so many seconds, and then going to a steady burning red. Because that's what the motoring public is used to seeing for a high-mounted stoplight, a red. So amber to get your attention, and then steady burning red to know that the brake light is the brakes are being applied, and that's where I see the industry best practices ending up, and we would really like to see it become. Let the trailer OEMs install these lights at the factory, because with these exemptions today, most of the trailer OEMs won't install them at the factory because they're auxiliary and because it's on an exemption. The way the exemptions are written, Most of them, they have to be installed at the time of delivery of the trailer, like in a pre-delivery, or the fleet has to do it when they take delivery of the trailer, whatever. But they most of the trailer OEMs will not put them on at the factory. They'll wire for
Well,
them, but they won't put them on at the factory.
well, and that's because FMVSS 108 doesn't allow for them. It's an exemption, right? The exemptions are for the after the fact, not for the actual new build.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And again, you ask where we see this going. It's an auxiliary light. There is one exemption in the marketplace right now to flash the DOT lights when the brake lights are pressed. But there seems to be some pretty widespread angst, I guess, is the word I would use about that, because once you see a regular DOT light flashing, does it become a turn signal? Does it become an emergency flash, or what does it become? Or does it become just because the brake lights are the brake pedal is being pushed? So that one I'm not so sure about. I think most everybody would like to see the auxiliary light mounted either in the lower rail of the trailer, close to the stoplights, or someplace on the trailer so that a vehicle trailing the trailer can see it.
Well, one of the things I'm sure of is that we've run out of time for this segment, but I'd like to thank you very much for joining us on Tech Talk with TMC. Look forward to having you back on the program again in 2026. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dave down in New Orleans. Dave?
Thank you very much, Robert. And Al, thank you very much. Always great to hear Al talk. You take notes when Al Anderson speaks, that's for sure. Robert, thank you so much. And we'll be back to the normal Wednesday next week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we will. And then we will have Joe Long on the program talking about antifreeze and coolant maintenance. So that edition of Tech